Hello. This is our third session, focus on classroom routines that promote vocabulary and comprehension development. I'm Susan Neuman at NYU, and I'm delighted to be with all of you today. About this module, the whole module is focusing on the research on oral language comprehension and vocabulary and its relationship to comprehension and content knowledge. It will focus on strategies designed to enhance children's language and vocabulary development, along with knowledge building supports that influence comprehension development. Helping to build a language for literacy development in the early primary grades sets the stage for reading success among all of our young learners. So this session is our third session together. We're focusing this time on classroom routines that promote vocabulary and comprehension development. And we're going to focus on some of the activities in classrooms that you can do on a regular basis. So in this module, like others, we'll have video examples of language interactions with teachers from New York. We will focus on questions to engage you in a rich discussion, hopefully with your colleagues. And we'll have articles that will allow you to deepen your understanding of the topic. Again, this is session 3, focusing on classroom routines that promote vocabulary and comprehension. So let's get going. And as a result of this session, we hope you'll learn the importance of book reading as a powerful tool for vocabulary development, the characteristics of genres and how they provide differential support for children's vocabulary development. We'll focus on the interactive reading styles that vary with genre characteristics that support vocabulary. And finally, how to create a context for independent reading, which is so important in terms of vocabulary enrichment. So for this session, you and your team will need a notebook to jot down different notes and brainstorming ideas. And in this module or session, you'll read Sims Bishop's wonderful classic article in 1990 and a new article by Henderson that we've included in this session. So let's get started. Here's what we know about vocabulary development, that book reading is known to be the single most powerful activity for children's vocabulary development, bar none. And why is this the case? Well, for one, children learn decontextualized language. And this is a term that we use that focuses on learning about vocabulary in using words that are not in the here and now. You know, you and I speak, and generally we speak within a particular context. Something is nearby that becomes referential to children's understanding of our language. But in books, the language will be decontextualized. It will be not in the here and now. And so this enables children to develop abstract thinking. In addition, book reading provides a different language, a more complex and more formal language, or what we call book language. So for example, once upon a time is not a language that, or a term that you and I would use in our colloquial language, but children will learn this kind of language in book reading. Third, they're going to learn rare words that are outside our colloquial language, words that are more literary in nature very often. And finally, they'll learn about their own culture as well as others in books. And this broadens children's understanding of where they are, their sense of identity, which is so critically important for their development. So when we think and say that reading and book reading is the most important literacy activity, there was a study done by Don Hayes and his colleague, And what they noticed is that if you looked at books, children's books will provide more rare words per 1,000 than many other activities. There'll be about 31 words in 1,000 words that are unusual or sophisticated for children. This means that children will have opportunities to see and hear words that are outside their current lexicon. And that is very, very important. Even preschool books provide rare words for children. And notice that those numbers of rare words are more than television and more than adult speech. So it once again tells you about the importance of book reading. So before engaging in the following activity, I'd love you to take a moment to read Sim Bishop's classic piece on mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. I'll give you a few minutes to read it. Here are some of the questions I would love for you to discuss. How would you describe these terms to someone who may not understand what mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors really means? How would you describe it to a parent? And then I'd like you to consider in your own program, do children have the opportunity to see such books? And third, how does this article relate to children's vocabulary development and motivation to read? And I think these are really important questions. So I'm going to give you and your team a couple more minutes, 10 minutes, to discuss these important ideas. So let's focus a bit on the book reading routine. And I would say that it should be a centerpiece of your morning meeting. So many people, for example, will begin with the calendar, they'll begin with the weather, they'll begin with a little bit of everything. And over time, that morning message gets very, very long. I would love you to think of book reading as a centerpiece, the most important thing in that morning meeting that you need to do. Because 10 to 12 minutes is often a useful sitting time for young children. After that, they begin to get antsy and sometimes they have behavioral issues as well. I'd like you to think about pre-reading the book you plan to read, because sometimes you may pick up a book and it's longer than you predicted. And you might want to figure out some good stopping places before you go on. Think about using sticky notes as a way to remind you several important places where you might want to explore a bit more. This is a strategy that we have found highly useful when you engage in book reading. It's called talk together, read together, reflect together. So talk together is that period of time where you're introducing those vocabulary words, many times using picture supports, you're using your child-friendly definitions, and you're only considering about 3 words. Not too many words, children will forget them. Then it's time to immediately put those words into context and read together and engage children in interactive reading. And we'll talk about the different kinds of interactive reading that you can do with children. And then finally, don't forget to reflect together, because the conversation that occurs after the book is often very rich and children have a lot to say. And it's an opportunity for you to review those vocabulary words and ask questions that deepen children's understanding of the book. So I'd love you to watch Mrs. Kurtz. Mrs. Kurtz is a wonderful teacher who is focusing on a new book that children have been reading about. And I'd love you to think about this. How does she engage children's responses? why does she continue to repeat and rephrase a child's response? And notice her use of individual responses and group responses. And talk a bit about why this is the case.
All right, so we've been learning about the mysteries of space. Can you tell me what you already know about outer space?
Nobody can't live on space because they might run out of oxygen.
What do you know?
There's no air or water in space.
Kimani?
Some people study space and they're called astronomers.
So Doc, what do you know about the mysteries of space?
That our galaxy is the Milky Way.
We live in the Milky Way galaxy. Angelis?
What we learned is that out of space there are planets and the sun. When the sun is out of space, it could hurt your eyes.
Okay. Darshini, what do you know about the mysteries of space?
Is that the Earth is closer than the sun.
The Earth is the third planet from the sun. Do you know the planets?
Yeah.
Tell me the planets that you know.
The sun.
Mercury,
Sun.
Venus,
Mars.
Jupiter,
Saturn.
Uranus,
Pluto.
Neptune. Remember we
I said it.
Pluto used to be a planet.
Dwarf planet.
Yes, but it's a dwarf planet.
I'd like you to think for a second. Did you see how smart our children are? And some of the words that they used? It's just delightful to watch them and watch them along with the information book. So some of the reflections that you might consider are the repetition and rephrasing that Mrs. Kurtz does. It really serves as a model and as an extension for children's language development. Did you notice that she limited her discourse to take into account as many children's responses without evaluating those responses, to encourage children to just take a chance? You know, there were a couple of statements that may not be exactly accurate, but she wanted to get those out before she framed the topic a little bit more. And those group responses ensured that all children were able to respond, including those who are learning the language. So one of the things we know is that different genre of books influence different ways of responding to books. So genre is a term that we use for the different kinds of writing of books that we will see even in these early childhood years. Excuse me, there are predictable books and books with repetitive language and common phrases repeatedly, frequently. They're often introduced through songs. So Chicka Chicka Boom Boom will be a predictable book, or Brown Bear will be a predictable book. And they're very lyrical and they help children hear the language quite frequently. Narrative are wonderful books with a narrative structure. We say they have setting, characters, plot, and resolution. And many times we will use narrative nonfiction. These are books that actually talk about important ideas, but they do it through a narrative structure, storybook structure. And finally, there are information books, nonfiction books that really provide factual information. Now, we know that there are many more genres than this, but these are the three that I will primarily use with children, and I'll tell you why. The predictable book has lots of language and repetitiveness, which helps me. The narrative teaches the children story structure, and the information books really tell us and deepen children's understanding of topics. So watch this predictable book. I will only do it for so long.
你们做 OK? Okay, here we go. Brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, what do you see? I see a yellow dove looking at me. Yellow duck, what do you see? I see a blue horse looking at me. Blue horse, what do you see? I see a green frog looking at me. Green frog, what do you see? I see a purple cat looking at me. Purple cat, what do you see? I see a white dog looking at me. White dog, what do you see? I see a black sheep looking at me. Black sheep, what do you see? I see a goldfish looking at me. Goldfish, what do you see? I see a monkey looking at me. Monkey, what do you see? I see children looking at me. Children, what do you see? We see a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, a goldfish, a monkey. That's what we see. 再一次 a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, a goldfish, and a monkey. That's what we see.
So you know that Brown Bear is one of children's favorites, but notice the highly memorable language and the lyricalness and the fact that it engages the whole group at a time. Physicality is very important for young children. They often talk and move at the same time. And it really supports their phonological awareness. And phonological awareness helps vocabulary development. Vocabulary development helps phonological awareness. So here's one of our wonderful teachers who during the COVID period actually did a lovely thing to show the importance of predictable books in her class.
Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Shanigan coming to you with a wonderful WOW lesson. We're going to continue learning about our awesome ocean animals. So let's start with our first vocabulary word, oceans. Remember, oceans, they are the largest body of water, of salty water, right? And oceans, unlike ponds and lakes, they are in continuous movement. They're always moving. And we explored our first two ocean animals last time. Does anybody remember what this was? Yeah, starfish, right? And a starfish we explored had 5 arms. So starfish, they're a smaller ocean animal, right? And then we also explored this ocean animal. Does anybody remember what this ocean animal was? Yeah, a whale. And remember, a whale is a very large marine mammal in the ocean, okay? So boys and girls, today I'm going to introduce to you 2 new WOW words. First, we're going to start with our clownfish. Do you guys know why they might be called a clownfish? Yeah, maybe it's because we see a pattern on it. Maybe because the colors of the clownfish are black, white, and orange. Do they look silly like a clown? Maybe. Some think they look silly, some don't, right? So clownfish is a new word that we're going to explore today in WOW. I'm going to put clownfish right here. And can you guys all say manatee? Yeah, manatee is a gentle mammal. And a manatee is like a whale because it's really large and it is a mammal of our ocean. So today, boys and girls, we're going to be reading Somewhere in the Ocean. And this is an awesome rhyming book. And actually, we get to sing this book's words to an awesome song that's known as Over in the Meadow. And we're going to explore this book with actually one of my really, really best friends. He's my fiance, and he's gonna join in with us with his guitar and play it live for us to sing. What do you think? Let's all welcome Mr. Harut and his guitar. Hey, Mr. Harut.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. Hi, everyone.
Are you ready?
I am. Are you?
Yeah, we are ready to explore the ocean and learn about more creatures in the ocean.
All right.
You got a good tune for us today?
Let's see.
Somewhere in the ocean where the warm waters run lived a mother manatee and her little calf one. Nibble said the mother, I nibble said the one. So they nibbled sea lettuce where the warm waters run.
So you can hear that she's actually putting this to music. This is, again, one of our wonderful New York teachers. And she introduced the content-rich words very deliberately and slowly. And then notice that she focused in her song not particularly on comprehending the words, but just making sure that the children heard the words in a predictable way. So predictable books, when we think of them, should be read straight through without necessarily stopping for questions. If we had stopped her from her singing of that wonderful predictable book, we would have ruined the moment, and it would have been an opportunity that the children would not be necessarily able to get back to. It's great for repeated reading. So sometimes we actually consider reading it 3 times, but not in one sitting, because we want children to actually remember it, just like Brown Bear, Brown Bear. So I would love for you guys to take a couple of minutes and select 2 or 3 of your favorite predictable books and share them with your colleagues. And I think this is a wonderful way to get kids who may be a little squirmy in the very beginning to actually enjoy share book reading. So take a couple of minutes. So the next kind of genre that we focus on a lot is narrative texts or storybooks. And typically teachers teach and use storybooks a lot, but I'd like you to encourage to think about these different genres as varying those genres, because they each are contributing a unique form of information to the children. So narrative stories can help children develop an understanding of the story structure, the common features of a story. And they can often blend, as we mentioned before, a narrative structure with a nonfiction topic. So it can help children learn about a topic like oceans, for example. So when I read to children a narrative story, I might stop at various times, 2 or 3 periods at most, to help children focus on the particular aspects of that story structure, whether it's setting, characters, event, or plot. And this helps kids to eventually develop sort of a underlying mnemonic of how stories work, which is very important to their understanding of comprehension. So when we reflect on storybooks, we know that the vocabulary is likely to be more literary. So again, some of the language he said, or some of the language that you and I just naturally understand, but it is more literary. It's ideal for helping the children retell the story in their own words. So we don't use retelling for predictable books because they're kind of silly and lyrical. but retelling storybook is appropriate, where you really want children to begin to develop that sense of story structure. And they're also ideal for writing a little summary about the story, either in pictures and print or pictures and print. And we call it writing, where the children are learning about the nuances of writing as opposed to illustrations. And then finally, information books, which are very important to children because they teach them a lot about a topic. So the vocabulary, however, will be more dense and it'll be more conceptual than a narrative book. It will often have technical vocabulary or that tier 3 that we come to expect. And it will often rely on pictures and print to support those ideas in the text. And so when I read information books, I think that one of the things that's very important is to focus on that vocabulary before reading so that the children really understand the density of the vocabulary, not just the label, but also the underlying concept. It's also important to consider reading only a portion of that book because of the density of the vocabulary, a little bit may mean a lot. And you want to be sure sometimes a bit of video can be a great support to consolidate that understanding of the information topic. So with information books, I would stop more frequently for understanding and conveying that information. I would focus on some close-ended questions to make sure that the children are really understanding what you are reading. And then follow it up with open-ended questions only when you're confident that they have a bit of the content. Otherwise, it might lead to a number of misconceptions. And once children have misconceptions, it's hard to move them away from them. They remember them just like they remember conceptions. So be sure to make sure that the kids understand what they're hearing or reading before you ask open-ended questions. So think about this. Think about your reading aloud from the past week. And what text genre did you use? Do you typically read only from one genre? Are children generally engaged as you read? Are there some types of books that are more engaging than others? Typically, how long are your reading aloud times? Do children have an opportunity to read and listen to informational texts? How they respond? And do you have interesting texts from a variety of genre? So take a moment and talk amongst your colleagues about these key issues. So hopefully you had some time to talk about those important issues. And so why is storybook reading more important than ever when children are beginning to learn to read? Even in first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way up, they're introducing words that they cannot read yet. And so it's really important to keep the storybook routine, even as children are beginning to read. It creates this opportunity for word consciousness. It provides instruction on vocabulary in the meaningful context, and it will give children an impetus to want to read because they'll be reading about interesting topics. So once we do this, we want to set the stage for wide reading. Wide reading means we want children to enjoy reading and to enjoy independent reading where they have the opportunity to read what they want. And I think that reading aloud to children sets the stage for engaging them in independent reading. So one of the ways in which we can begin is by creating a classroom library. And I think an attractive classroom library that is well organized with lots of books, lots of opportunities, really sets the stage and makes a difference, makes children want to read. I begin by carving out a space in the room. It's always good to create almost like a nook. Children love small spaces, knows how this teacher is bounding it in various ways. Classroom libraries should have a signage that says this is the classroom library, this is the place to go, because a library is really a gift that keeps on giving. Think about comfortable and inviting. Like when you go to read, don't you want to read in a comfortable place? So pillows, rugs, beanbag chairs, something that allows children to just hang out in some ways. And of course, book selection is so critically important. You need really a sufficient variety of books at different levels. And one of the things I always notice are the books in really good shape, because that means a lot to children. There should be a variety of genres so that children can pick what they're interested in. And the selection should be reflective of your population. And finally, language diversity. We should have books that are in the children's primary language as well. And one of the things I'd like you to think about is, are your books categorized by level or by interest or by both? And I would say having books that are characterized in many different ways is really important for your classroom library. I'd like you to review the article by Henderson and her colleagues and think about inventorying your classroom libraries. Consider this question: how diverse are my books in my classroom? How well does the literature in my classroom reflect my child's identities? Do they see themselves in your classroom libraries? So I'd like you to take a moment to think about the implications of your findings. And what steps do you need to take to make sure that your library is representative of the wonderful children that we have here in New York? I'll give you a few minutes to consider. In addition, your environment in your library should promote and give guidelines for children for selecting independent reading books. You know, many of us will go into classrooms and we'll see that some of the books that children are selecting for independent reading are not geared to what they can really read or even their interests. They sort of just pick up a book. So providing them with clear guidelines on how to pick a good book is really important. Like, why are you reading this book? What purpose? Are you really interested in this book? Check yourself to understand whether or not you understand your reading. And do you know most of the words? So this teacher came up with a very interesting chart that says, what's easy? Sometimes children want easy books, but sometimes they're too easy. And that's not helping the children grow enough. The just right books and the books that might be too challenging to them. So think about something like this, because it's very helpful for guiding children, and you want to give them choice, but at the same time, you want them to make a good choice and a good use of their time. Here's another example. Here are some charts and displays, a way of, can I retell the story? And questions we should ask about our reading. And I'm sure you can all make beautiful charts, but I think these charts are really, really helpful Number one, they convey the importance of independent reading, and they also provide a spot for children to look at and remind themselves about how to select books. And this is really an important step in developing wide reading and enjoyment of leisure reading. So you can use this checklist to consider your literacy environment. How does it support children's reading? Do I need to declutter my classroom environment to emphasize children's independent reading? I have this here because I have a feeling that many of us really do need to declutter so that children are focused on the things we want them to focus on. And what signage in classroom might be most effective for really helping children select the right books for them to read? So in summary, in this session, hopefully, I've conveyed a number of things that I think are really important for you to consider. And that is that teachers can make an enormous difference in children's vocabulary development. They can make them consciously aware of words. Every time we use words and use unusual words, they pop for kids and they are reminded. So one child, for example, I went to a classroom and she said, "I'm wearing camouflage." And I knew that she had just heard that word from a teacher. So they become conscious of our words, and that's really important. Provide them many opportunities for vocabulary learning by highlighting the benefits of different genre of texts during your storybook reading. That's really important because it helps them develop an appreciation of these different genres. Develop a routine that promotes children's conversational routines and terms and verbal engagement. So they get used to the idea that you're going to engage them in lots of conversation. And then finally, enhance the classroom environment to promote independent reading activities. Your read aloud time is only a short time in the activity of the day. So we want children to really want to read, and that independent reading time is really important. Thank you for a wonderful session. I'll see you next time.